Hey, we're live. We're back live, man. Like I mentioned, man, we're back live. Who's joining the live stream, y'all? Explore with us reaction starting now. If you join the live stream, hit the like button for me. Somebody say something in chat. I know I said I was going to be back in 10 minutes. It's been a little longer than that, but hey. I want to definitely start with this longest story that we got. The longest one. Or not. Let's just start with the most disturbing story you've never heard of. Jeremiah Bean, solved true crime documentary, man. Let me know if you're present. Where's everybody at? We got one person watching, man. So without further ado, let's just hop into the reaction. People will come in. If you need full context of the story, you can definitely start the live stream from any point in time and start it from the beginning and then try to catch up. But let's hop into this reaction, man. Explore with Us is a dope narrator. Check him out if you haven't checked him out. Link is in the description.
So without further ado, Iwu crew. Today, we are covering the brutal case of convicted killer Jeremiah Bean. Our story begins many years ago in the small town of Fernley, Nevada, on May 10th, 2013. Tucked inside of Lyon County, the city of Fernley is home to a little over 20,000 people. It was an exceptionally average Friday afternoon for local residents Robert and Dorothy Pape. Like any other Friday, the 84-year-old retired couple spent their time tending to their home and preparing for the potential Mother's Day weekend celebrations to come. Robert Pape spent a large part of the afternoon doing yard work in the Nevada sun, while his wife enjoyed a midday nap in their shared bedroom. The desert air was stuffy, but the day was otherwise like any other for the Papes. That is, until an unexpected guest let himself into their quaint Lyon County home uninvited. As Robert Pape began to finish up his work in the couple's front yard, 27-year-old Jeremiah Bean walked through an unlocked door and into the Papes' living room. At the time, Jeremiah Bean had been fresh off an expired parole for a burglary charge 6 months before stepping into the Papes' residence.
This fool.
Bean had been considered a juvenile delinquent in the state of California before serving time in Nevada prisons for burglary. During his parole, Bean began to associate himself with Fernley's definition of the wrong crowd. Local residents referred to Bean and his friends as a pack of jackals who wreaked havoc when they weren't doing or selling substances out of their garage. This havoc often involved.
Sometimes you gotta get knocked down lower than you ever been to stand up taller than you ever were and show them that you're stronger. This kid sounds like someone that was bullied.
Intense partying and stealing whatever they could to keep their pockets stuffed. On that fateful day in May, Jeremiah Bean intended to do just that. He snuck into the Papes' house and wandered his way through the halls until he came across the master bedroom. There, he saw a sleeping Dorothy Pape face down on the mattress, snuggled up against a pillow. As Bean rummaged through the Papes' dresser drawers searching for jewelry, he found a .22 revolver sitting at the bottom. He held it in his hand, and as he did so, Dorothy Pape began to stir in her sleep. Whether it was a result of anxiousness or his original intent, Bean raised the revolver with a steady hand and fired.
This guy just savagely killed people in their own home. For what reason? No.
Her body went slack against the bed once more. Bean moved quickly to stuff his pockets with necklaces, bracelets, earrings, and other valuables he could get his hands on in the Papes' bedroom. As he did so, Robert Pape rushed back into his home to investigate the commotion's source. As he turned the corner of the hallway, toward the bedroom he had shared with his wife for decades. He was shot as well. Though Robert Papes' last moments were filled with worry, he was spared having to see the brutal fate of the love of his life. Jeremiah Bean had no remorse. After all, it was Friday, and he needed cash.
Man, these kids rarely have remorse, man. These are some psychos, some delinquents, usually high off something. You know, obviously had a broken upbringing to where they just... I don't see how a lot of these people just don't feel like there's nothing to lose, man. Like, for what? What's the purpose, you know? For you to pawn some, like, petty items?
Jeremiah did not stop there. However, he did waver. His initial motive for murdering Robert and Dorothy Pape was rooted in needing money. In addition to the pocketed jewelry and revolver, Bean swiped the keys to Robert Papes' truck and left town. He headed down the infamous Interstate 80 toward Reno to pawn off the goods he had stolen from the Papes. With a fresh $1,000 in his pocket, he met up with his Fernley friends to spend the remainder of Friday night in the way they always had, partying. Jeremiah was generous when it came to his friends that evening. He bought drinks, ensuring his place as the life of the party. He mentioned his day's actions to at least 6 of his friends, bragging about the success of his looting. Jeremiah partied to his heart's content. In the morning, Jeremiah awoke, feeling rather satisfied and fueled by the notion that his plan had been successful. So successful, in fact, that he realized he could use the already secured Pape residence as a source of income for the foreseeable future.
What?
Throughout the remainder of the weekend, Jeremiah drove back and forth between Reno and Fernley along the I-80, nicknamed the Big Lonely, because the desolate interstate appeared to go on forever, with nothing around. On one of his first trips back to the Papes' house in Fernley, Jeremiah grew tired of looking at the lifeless faces of Robert and Dorothy. He dragged their limp bodies across the home's length and piled them on top of each other in a nearby closet and buried them in clothes. Without the decaying witnesses watching him, Jeremiah looted any items from the home that he believed he could turn a profit with. After each scavenge at the Pape house, Jeremiah would return to Reno to pawn off more items for cash. In fact, after bragging to his friends about his Mother's Day weekend antics, they took it upon themselves to raid the Pape residence as well. On the following Monday morning, Jeremiah had another truck full of items that he wished to pawn off in Reno. His greedy nature allowed him to believe that this new routine of looting and selling the late Papes' property could go on forever.
That's what gets you caught up, man. When you get too greedy, people don't know how to just, like, stop. You know what I mean? That's what always gets you caught up, when you always keep doing it over and over again, bro.
Or at least as long as he could milk it. As previously mentioned, the I-80 was rather desolate, stretching from Northern California to New Jersey. During his drive along the Big Lonely, Jeremiah realized that the truck he stole from the Papes was low on gas. As he steadily approached Reno, he decided to get off at the Mustang exit, where he had seen a sign for a nearby gas station. Though he believed his gas stop to be well calculated, Jeremiah accidentally took a wrong turn, resulting in his need to get back on the interstate. As he attempted to do so, the Papes' truck became high-centered, and Jeremiah was sufficiently stuck. After attempting to turn over the engine multiple times with no luck, Jeremiah decided to abandon the vehicle. He assumed that he could walk along the interstate and come across a payphone that he could use to call one of his friends to come pick him up.
That's just the luck of the draw right there, man. Yeah, that's the mistake that got you caught, buddy.
Wandered down the I-80 on foot for about a quarter mile before his stranded state took a turn. Much to his avail, an unsuspecting Eleazar Graham pulled up alongside Jeremiah to offer some assistance. Eleazar, described as an ever-helpful individual by his family and friends, had no idea that he was looking into the eyes of a cold-blooded killer. Prepared to provide this total stranger with a jump or a ride if necessary, Eleazar rolled down his window and introduced himself to Jeremiah. Jeremiah had a decision to make. The simple notion that Eleazar had seen Jeremiah's face and noticed the abandoned truck further down the interstate meant that Eleazar knew too much. Jeremiah allowed the small talk to continue between himself and Eleazar for a few moments before slipping his hand behind his back. There, he fidgeted with Pape's revolver that was nestled in the small of his back. Before Eleazar could even process what was about to happen, Jeremiah whipped the .22 out of his jeans' waistband and aimed it at Eleazar.
Really?
The 52-year-old newspaper delivery man was killed.
Dang.
It was then.
So a good Samaritan strolls along. Homie pulls out the strap and smokes him. That's crazy, man. That's why people like to say you can't help individuals nowadays, man. When doing good deeds go wrong. You know, that's wild, man. This kid, straight menace to society.
Then that Jeremiah knew that he had to act swiftly. Though the interstate was desolate, Jeremiah was not so naive as to believe that it would remain that way for long. He maneuvered himself to the driver's side door of the truck and forced it open. He unbuckled the seatbelt that was supporting the lifeless body of Eleazar Graham. As he did so, Eleazar's body slumped forward onto the steering wheel. Jeremiah caught it and mustered up the strength to drag him out of the seat and onto the hot asphalt beneath him. Jeremiah tossed Eleazar in front of the truck, wherein he quickly hopped into the still warm driver's seat and shifted the gear from park to drive. Without hesitation, Jeremiah stepped on the gas. He waited just long enough to feel both the truck's front and back tires roll over Eleazar's body. He parked the truck once more,
Savage.
leaving the keys in the ignition, and hopped out.
Shout out to Schrodinger's gat. He said, how many people watching just said, what the? It's a payphone. Who knows what a payphone is?
He dragged Eleazar to the side of the road and tossed some assorted newspaper sheets and a carpet over him.
He's still
to
not
hide his
done with
shape.
it? What?
Once he was satisfied with disguising Eleazar as trash, Jeremiah jumped back into Eleazar's truck and sped off, back towards Fernley. There was no time to follow through with his original plan to pawn the Papes' items off in Reno. He realized he needed to dispose of Eleazar's truck quickly before someone noticed he was missing. As Jeremiah sped off down the interstate, Eleazar was added to the over 500 other deceased individuals abandoned along the I-80 over the years. Just like that, Eleazar Graham went from being a warm-hearted, selfless individual to another I-80 statistic. Upon returning to Fernley, Jeremiah turned down Jessica Lane and approached the Pape house that had been picked clean. The smell of the decaying bodies of Robert and Dorothy Pape began to flood the hallways and rooms of the abandoned house.
Crazy.
Jeremiah drove Eleazar's truck into the garage
Hit the like
and removed
button.
his
Hit the
belongings
like
from the
button.
vehicle, along with himself. He popped the hood of the pickup truck and opened all of the doors before lighting the whole thing on fire.
This guy.
As he watched the fire spread from Eleazar's pickup truck to the Papes' garage walls, he ran. The flames licked the sides of the house quickly in the Nevada sun, spreading more and more rapidly the bigger they became. Jeremiah had been staying with a friend named Patrick Brady on Tamsin Lane, a few blocks away from the burning Pape residence. When he entered Brady's house, he was beginning to panic. Jeremiah began to realize that his actions were larger than he had initially intended them to be. He confided in his friend Patrick, explaining the details of the crimes he had committed. He recounted murdering Dorothy Pape while she slept, stealing her personal belongings, murdering her husband, pawning off their property, partying in Reno, murdering Eleazar Graham on the I-80, and lighting the evidence on fire at the Pape House. Patrick Brady listened as Jeremiah Bean inadvertently recorded a confession on the cell phone in his pocket. While Patrick and Jeremiah discussed
Hit the like button as you join the live stream, man. We got 10 people in here. Do me that favor. Hit the like button. Let's get to 20 likes.
the weekend's events, they noticed their neighbors
We got a crazy story going on. If y'all ain't informed, pay attention.
standing in the backyard of their house a few doors down.
Young Savage.
Jeremiah realized that they were watching the Pape House burn from a distance.
This fool, man.
In a panic, Jeremiah dashed out of Brady's house and let himself into the neighbor's home. 67-year-old Angie Duff and her 69-year-old boyfriend, Lester Lieber, remained in Angie's backyard.
Bro, don't
watching.
even tell me. He just going house to house to house. Any person, civilian he come across, he's murking them. This kid. And how old is he? I didn't even catch that at the beginning. If you know how old they said he was, I'm sure it's very young. I'm sure he's still in his teens. I don't know, man. But this kid, he's a problem.
As fire trucks continued to flood down Jessica Lane toward the Pape House. When Angie walked back into the house, she found Jeremiah Bean standing in her living room in a blood-stained t-shirt with her .38 in his possession.
This kid.
Upon looking into Jeremiah's eyes, Angie knew she was in trouble. She began to scream as she frantically ran toward her bedroom. Jeremiah fired at the fleeing Angie Duff. She slumped to the floor as her boyfriend Lester rushed towards the back door in a panic. Lester watched Jeremiah standing over his girlfriend from behind the sliding glass door. When Jeremiah noticed him, he fired shots in Lester's direction, shattering the glass barrier between the two of them. It was then that Lester rushed to Jeremiah, attempting to remove the .38 from his possession. The two men struggled with each other for a moment, Lester taking advantage of Jeremiah's scrawny frame, until Jeremiah was able to finish off Lester.
He took him
During
out.
the struggle between Jeremiah and Lester, Angie had miraculously found the strength to stand up. In fact, Angie had summoned the courage to rush into the kitchen and emerge with a knife. Angie did not have any real plan, but she knew she had to do something to potentially spare her life and save her boyfriend's. She rushed the sweaty Jeremiah Bean, praying he'd wasted all of the rounds. When she got close enough to Bean, she lunged at him with all of her strength. Bean moved swiftly to catch her hand and remove the knife from her grasp. He then finished her off as well.
Wow.
Jeremiah Bean tossed her to the side and rushed out of the house. In a hurry, he removed his t-shirt and ran one door down to the nearest neighbor's home. Their front door was locked, and panic had begun to set in for Jeremiah. He crouched down and slid his narrow shoulders and slim waist through the half-ajar doggy door at the base of the locked door.
This guy.
Once inside, he maneuvered himself into a crawl space above the hallway. Here, in this hot, dusty crawl space, he emptied his pockets of all evidence. He dropped the .22 revolver that had once belonged to Robert and Dorothy Pape, the $1,600 cash he had made from selling stolen items from the Papes, and the .38 he had used on Angie Duff and Lester Lieber. Jeremiah removed himself from the crawl space quickly after disregarding the evidence he had on him. When he reached the living room on his way out of the home, he was confronted by the house owner, whom he had not yet seen. No longer being armed, he ran past the homeowner and dove back outside through the doggy door. With adrenaline pumping through his veins, he made the split-second decision to run back to Angie Duff's home, in hopes of stealing a car belonging to her.
He's stealing everybody's car.
He grabbed both sets of keys from the kitchen counter and let himself out of the house through the garage. He realized that Angie and Lester had parked their cars along the street rather than inside the garage. He impatiently...
Bro, where are the eyewitnesses at, though? If you got some kid running down the street, I don't know. It seemed like a real friendly neighborhood. Like, where's the neighbors at? He got a bloodied shirt. He's hopping fences. He's scurrying and scuffling through the doggy doors. Nobody sees him though. Come on, bro. Like a little kid riding his bike down the street, no witnesses. Sometimes that be baffling me because you see scenarios like this in movies to where like you see in a movie and you're like, man, this is only happening in a movie. But according to this story, it seems like it happens in real life. People getting murked, running out in the middle of the street in the neighborhood, broad daylight, the bloody T-shirt, and nobody sees them. Like, I don't know, man.
He waited for the garage door to open, enough for him to slide under and abandon the crime scene. Much to his dismay, there were a plethora of police cars parked directly outside that served as a barricade in the event that he would try to escape. The commotion had been so loud and worrisome for the neighbors of Tamsin Lane that multiple people had called for the local law enforcement to come to investigate. The second the hot Nevada sunlight touched Jeremiah Bean's skin as he emerged from Angie Duff's garage, he was met with police officers ready to put him in handcuffs. The officers confiscated 2 sets of car keys from the jean shorts Jeremiah was wearing. Jeremiah Bean murdered 5 innocent people over the span of a single weekend.
This kid.
His fingerprints were found in the Papes' truck that he'd abandoned on Interstate 80. A quarter of a mile down the road, Eleazar Graham's body was recovered after officers discovered his pickup truck's remains in the garage of the charred home that had once belonged to Robert and Dorothy Pape. The bodies of Angie Duff and her longtime boyfriend Lester Lieber were discovered directly after Bean's arrest. Their families' lives were irreparably damaged in minutes by a man who had no remorse. Richard Davies, Jeremiah Bean's attorney, remarked that the demon of that methamphetamine is so deeply entrenched.
That's what I was wondering the whole time, whether he was on drugs. I guess I missed it the whole time. I thought he was doing all this sober, that he was that whacked in the head, but he was on meth.
In his soul, that is the one he's going to answer to. Davies tried to convince Bean to plead guilty to receive a lesser sentence than the death penalty, but Bean ignored the advice. Davies tried to argue against a harsh sentence, saying that though Bean's rampage was irrevocable and brutal, it resulted from his rough upbringing, meth addiction, and below-average intelligence.
Below-average intelligence.
In under 2 hours in court, the jury found Jeremiah Bean guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors concluded his trial in stating that what the evidence has shown is that Jeremiah Bean is not a part of a pack of jackals. He is not the center of a pack of jackals, but rather, Jeremiah Bean is a lone wolf.
He's a lone wolf.
As of September of 2019, the court ruled that Bean's death penalty sentence could move forward. Though the lives of Dorothy and Robert Pape, Eleazar Graham, Angie Duff, and Lester Lieber cannot be replaced, the city of Fernley can confidently say that Jeremiah Bean will never be able to take the lives of anyone else ever again.
They finally caught Buddy. That's crazy, man. So I'm doing another reaction, man. If you're in the live stream right now, hit the like button. We got 8 people. That was the most disturbing story you've never heard of, Jeremiah Bean. So Buddy was a meth head, a young kid. Murdered 5 people in Fernley, Nevada. So the next reaction we're hopping into is Cold Case with a Shocking Twist, True Crime Documentary and Solved Missing Persons Case, man. This is a lengthy video. If you're here for it, you're here for it. If it's past your bedtime, good night. I appreciate all 7 of you that are in the live stream currently. Do me that favor, hit the like button, man. Let's get to 20 likes. So let's hop into this next reaction.
What is up, Ewu crew? The story we have in store for you today is a dark one, full of heartbreak, lies, and one man's intent to live above the law. If you enjoy true crime, mysteries, and true stories, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Janelle Matthews was born on February 9, 1972, in Santa Barbara, California, to her birth mother, Terry Vieira Martinez. At the time, Janelle's mother was just a girl herself, She had only been 13 years old when she delivered her daughter at the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. Despite her initial willingness to follow through with her pregnancy, 13-year-old Terry realized that she was not yet cut out for motherhood after about a month into caring for Janelle.
Oh, man.
By March of...
Not one of these stories. Crazy mother alert, crazy mother alert. There was a similar story we had tuned into the other night, and it was referencing this, and of course, like, I don't know, the mother had, killed the child. I don't understand these scenarios. It's like, man, just get the kid up for adoption. But I don't know, that's immediately where my mind went, not to throw the story off, but I just don't get it. Just give the kid up for adoption,
Of 1972, Terry put Janelle up for adoption in the hopes of giving her daughter a better life.
Hey, my fault.
Than the one she would have been able to provide. At the very same time, a couple in Greeley, Colorado, named Jim and Gloria Matthews, had been intently searching for another child to add to their slowly growing family. Upon hearing of Janelle's need for adoptive parents, Jim and Gloria decided to take her in as their own. Janelle was welcomed into the Matthews family with open arms and became the baby sister to her new sibling, Jennifer. And the rest, it seemed, was history. The Matthews family was complete. Throughout Janelle's childhood, she was raised to become strong and independent. Some may have called her assertiveness sassy, but any and all who met Janelle knew that she was one of the smartest 12-year-olds around. Janelle always had big plans in her day-to-day life. In fact, any small event was a big deal in Janelle's eyes because of her ever-present positive attitude. So, in 1984, as the holiday season overtook the Colorado city of Greeley and Christmas Day approached, 12-year-old Janelle was as excited as ever to spend time with friends and family. Unfortunately for the Matthews family, evil does not take time off around the holidays.
Dang.
Kong made a promise to protect her.
We need Kong.
Kong? Another Kong, man?
As per their usual holiday schedule, the school that Janelle and Jennifer attended, the Franklin Middle School, had been preparing for their choir's annual holiday concert. Janelle had been anticipating the concert for months, as she had been chosen to perform in it herself. However, in the days leading up to the concert, Janelle had come down with a cold. The cold was not debilitating, though it was an inconvenience for a young girl who desperately wanted...
My intuition's already going places, y'all. I hate when I ruin stories because I'm able to predict what's going to happen, but maybe I shouldn't say nothing. Let's just continue. But don't say I did tell y'all so when I say
to hang out with her friends before the holiday break. By December 20th, just days before Christmas, Janelle was practically begging her parents to let her go to school that day. Unlike most kids Janelle's age, who would do anything in their power to stay home from school, Janelle was adamant about going. Janelle assured her parents that she was feeling fine and that she would take it easy during the day. She told her parents that she had gifts to give to her friends, whom she wouldn't see for weeks because of winter break. Not to mention, Janelle had been looking forward to participating in the holiday concert for weeks, and she did not want to miss it for the world. So, Jim and Gloria agreed that Janelle could go to school and the concert under one condition. She had to come straight home after the choir's performance to rest. Unfortunately, neither of Janelle's parents would actually be able to make it to the performance that evening. Her father, Jim, had promised Janelle's older sister, Jennifer, that he would watch her basketball game that night, while Janelle's mother, Gloria, needed to go out of town for a few days upon learning that her own mother had fallen ill across the country. Despite not having her family in the audience that evening, Janelle was nonetheless ecstatic to be a part of her school's small skip.
Hold on. I need to repeat that. Sorry, guys.
Unfortunately, neither of Janelle's parents would actually be able to make it to the performance that evening. Her father, Jim, had promised Janelle's older sister, Jennifer, that he would watch her basketball game that night. Her family in the audience that evening, Janelle was nonetheless ecstatic to be a part of her school's small-scale production. And she was even able to meet up with one of her friends, Deanna Ross, at the start of the event and effectively secure herself a ride home from Deanna's father, Russell. The concert was everything that Janelle had hoped it would be. On the drive home in Deanna's father's car, Janelle and Deanna chatted about the event, their day, and their respective Christmas plans. It was the perfect ending to an amazing day in Janelle's eyes. Unfortunately, Janelle's night was far from over. As Russell pulled his car up along the curb outside of Janelle's home around 8:15 p.m., the two girls said their goodbyes and wished each other a Merry Christmas. Janelle got out of the car and headed up the driveway to the front door. Russell and Deanna waited patiently in their car just outside and watched to make sure that Janelle made it inside without any problems. Once inside, Janelle flashed the lights in the foyer to indicate that she was safely home. With that, Russell and Deanna drove off toward their own home. Little did they
Hit the like button, man. Hit the like button. Let's get to 20 likes.
know that they would be the last people ever to see Janelle alive. At around 8:30 p.m., records show that Janelle answered a call made to the Matthews home phone and even took a message for her father, as the caller had been trying to reach Jim. Janelle's father was the principal of a nearby elementary school called Platte Valley Elementary School, and one of the teachers had been trying to contact him to say that he wouldn't be at work the following morning. That was the last time anyone ever heard from Janelle.
What the heck?
Well, with the exception of one other individual, the sinister one lurking in the shadows. After finishing the call,
Bro, sketchiness to the up nose. I'm just like... Shout out to Victor, man. He said, glad to see something I went through. At least the government gave me a way to release my anger. What you mean, man? Impressions the same way. Scooby-Doo mystery stories.
Janelle allegedly made herself comfortable in the living room. She had a very specific spot on the couch that all but had her name engraved on it. She was known to sit on her side of the couch, next to her family's decadent Christmas tree, and relax by the warmth of a space heater. With Christmas just days away, that mental image of an exhausted Janelle curled up on the couch with her shawl draped over her shoulders was the epitome of the holiday season. Unfortunately, the calm of the evening was short-lived. At around 9:30 p.m., just an hour after Janelle had been dropped off, Jim arrived home to an empty house. The notion of an empty house was not necessarily out of the ordinary. He assumed at first that Janelle had simply stayed out a bit later with her friends, despite the agreement she had made with both of her parents before going to school that morning. And then, Jim entered the living room. On the couch, Jim noticed three very specific things. Firstly, the heater was on with no one there to embrace its warmth. Second, Janelle's favorite shawl was strewn across the back of the couch, as if she had just taken it off the moment before. And lastly, a pair of Janelle's shoes were positioned perfectly in front of her usual spot on the couch, as if they had been kicked off the second she sat down. The only thing missing from the picturesque scene in the living room was Janelle. Jim tried to remain calm as he quickly searched the house for his youngest daughter. When he found no other sign of Janelle, Jim heard the front door open and rushed downstairs. When he arrived at the foot of the stairs, he let out a sigh as he locked eyes with Jennifer, who had returned home around 10 o'clock. Jennifer was entirely unaware of her father's sudden panic. When she told him that she had not seen Janelle all night, he knew right away that something was terribly wrong. Almost immediately, Jim called the police and reported that his daughter was missing. Greeley police arrived at the Matthews residence at 320 43rd Avenue Court within 15 minutes of Jim's initial phone call. The possibility of a missing child in the chill of the winter was worthy of a rush. As the police walked around the interior and exterior of the home, They were astonished to find virtually no evidence of a struggle, nor any sign of forced entry. At first, the authorities believed that Janelle must have left on her own accord, even though she seemed to have left the house without so much as a pair of shoes or a jacket on a cold night. Jim assured the police that his 12-year-old daughter could not have gone very far if she was barefoot in the snow. And then, upon taking a closer look around the outside of the house, the officers found something peculiar. Footprints in the snow around the living room windows. Footprints that were too big to be left by a young girl and seemed to indicate that someone had been watching Janelle from outside the home.
Creeper.
Despite the seemingly eerie nature of the footprints, the police carried on with their initial theory that Janelle had potentially run away. The authorities involved in the case eventually released a summary of her disappearance. On the evening of December 20th, 1984, 12-year-old Janelle Matthews was dropped off at her parents' home by her friend's family at approximately 8:30 p.m. When her parents returned home later that night, they discovered that Janelle was missing. She was last seen wearing a red blouse, dark gray sweater vest, charcoal gray skirt, light blue ski jacket, and house slippers. Jim once again tried to convince the police that there was practically no way that Janelle would have run away. Jim stated, "There were too many neat things happening to her. She had a girlfriend coming to sleep over the day after she disappeared. She was going to be in the Christmas presentation at church. She's such a ham. Plus with Christmas." Though the police acknowledged Jim's assertions, they followed through investigating Janelle's disappearance from the perspective of a runaway. They went through Janelle's locker and bedroom in hopes of finding any evidence of a plan to leave. Coming as no surprise to Jim and Gloria, the police found nothing out of the ordinary. The investigators' runaway theory was further debunked when Janelle had still not shown up back home in the days after her disappearance. In most cases of runaways, the child usually returns home within a few days after their initial choice to leave. As the police shifted their focus to examine the possibility that Janelle had actually been kidnapped from her home, there was only one real person of interest that they had in mind: Janelle's birth mother, Terry Vieira Martinez. It is not entirely uncommon for biological parents to reach out to their children long after having given them up for adoption. So, for weeks, investigators monitored Terry's movements in hopes of finding some indication that she had been involved with Janelle's disappearance. All the while, her family panicked and worried that something horrible had happened to their daughter. Though the police's initial assumption of Terry's involvement had been understandable, it was extremely far off and unsubstantiated. In fact, Terry had not even known that her biological daughter was missing. More so than that, she never actually made contact with Janelle. Even with their most promising person of interest found to be completely innocent, the police certainly took their time to investigate other potential leads.
This sounds like a very lengthy story.
They interviewed friends, family, neighbors, teachers, and essentially anyone who had been near the Matthews residence on the night of December 20th, 1984. Unfortunately, every lead that the investigators had eventually led to a dead end, and Janelle's case wasn't the only one on the nation's mind. During the 70s and 80s, more than 1 million children went missing in the United States every single year. 1 month after Janelle went missing, the news station KMGH reported on a 24-hour prayer vigil for Janelle's safe return that was conducted at the Greeley Church where the Matthews attended.
12-year-old Janelle Matthews disappeared from her Greeley home 1 month ago today. It's believed she's the victim of a kidnapping. She has not been seen or heard from since December 20th. Authorities and the girl's parents still have many avenues open to them in their search, but the Matthews family feels their widest avenue is prayer.
We want to pray for Janelle. We want to pray for the family, that God can do the right things, that his timing will be precise.
A 24-hour prayer vigil began at noon today at most Greeley churches. The Matthews family, Jim, Gloria, and 16-year-old Jennifer, attended
This is in Colorado. I was about to say, where is this at again? This is in Colorado.
the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene. Throughout the ordeal, their faith has been strong and unwavering. Meanwhile, Jim
Gotta keep
Matthews
the
says
faith.
he and his
Gotta keep the
family
faith.
will keep hanging on to the hope that Janelle is alive and will one day be found. We'll keep hanging on, he says, and will not give up.
Months passed since Janelle disappeared, and in March of 1985, President Ronald Reagan decided it was time to speak out regarding the astonishing disappearances of children all over the country. Understanding the importance of the media, President Reagan pleaded with journalists across the country to help aid investigators in locating missing children and bringing them home. During his speech, President Reagan even mentioned Janelle by name, stating,
"Well over 1 million American children disappear from their homes or neighborhoods every year, causing, as we can all understand, heartbreaking anguish. For example, I learned about Jonelle Matthews of Greeley, Colorado, who would have celebrated a happy 13th birthday with her family just last month. But 5 days before Christmas, Jonelle disappeared from her home."
Despite the efforts of the president and the media alike, Janelle's case went cold. There was a potential piece of evidence found in May of 1985 when a portion of a person's scalp was located on a farmer's land in Weld County. However, upon further investigation, the skin and hair attached to the scalp did not match Janelle's. After confirming that the remains did not belong to her daughter, Gloria stated, "I wasn't really prepared emotionally to look at the scalp, but it was a job that had to be done. I felt a great sense of relief when I realized it wasn't Janelle." And despite the Matthews' initial relief, it was clear that the investigation was once again stuck without any more leads. And it would remain that way for a very long time.
A lot of cases is like that, man. They go super cold for like decades. It's crazy how it's typically technology that's able to, they resurface the cases and they're able to connect the dots. A lot of it's DNA work, you know what I mean? But you'd be surprised how many cases go cold. But, I commend a lot of the cops that are able to they work on these cold cases. That's a portion of their focus and they're able to solve these crimes years later. Hats off to that, just staying at it, you know what I mean?
10 years had passed with no leads, no indication that Janelle was still alive, and no hope to locate her anytime soon. Nearly a decade after Janelle first went missing, Jim and Gloria finally had their daughter declared legally deceased. Despite the finality of declaring their daughter dead, Jim and Gloria longed for proper closure. They just wanted to understand what had happened to their bright little girl, whose smile lit up any room she entered. At the time, it seemed that the Matthews would never get answers to the heartbreaking questions they had been holding on to since 1984. Staying in Greeley proved to be far too painful for the Matthews family to bear over the years. Jim and Gloria eventually retired to Costa Rica, and Jennifer moved to Washington. And then, in July of 2019, nearly 35 years after Janelle disappeared without a trace, the entire case broke wide open. As construction workers prepared land in a rural area of Greeley, Colorado's southeastern side for an oil and gas pipeline dig, they came across something peculiar. The team of construction workers had been slowly but surely moving the earth around 4:50 p.m. on Tuesday, July 23rd, just a mere 15 miles southeast of Janelle's old home, when they shockingly came across a set of human remains. Upon further investigation and DNA testing, the buried remains were discovered to be those of 12-year-old Janelle Matthews, the girl whose disappearance had turned the town of Greeley upside down all those years before. Not only did the discovery of Janelle's remains allow for the Matthews family to come to terms with their daughter's disappearance, but it also allowed investigators to determine Janelle's cause of death. You see, despite the fact that her body had obviously decomposed in the 30 years since it had been buried, There was a very clear bullet hole in what remained of her skull. As the investigation finally began, Janelle's parents returned to Greeley to put their daughter to rest in her hometown. For them, uncovering Janelle's remains meant that their daughter had been dead for the entirety of the 35 years that they had hoped endlessly to eventually bring her home. Despite this discovery, it did not provide them with any answers as to what actually happened to Janelle just days before Christmas in 1984. On September 13, 2019, investigators from Greeley Police Department publicly announced that they had a person of interest in Janelle's abduction and subsequent murder. In fact, the suspect was none other but a man whom they had secretly had their eye on the entire time.
Who that?
Steve Pankey. Steve Pankey was not an average former Greeley resident. Rather, he was well known and influential. He had actually run for governor in Idaho in 2014 and 2018, and even ran for lieutenant governor in 2010. You might be wondering, what does a politician have to do with a 3-decade-old cold case? The answer is sure to shock you. Pankey was first associated with the land where Janelle's remains were found, though he later denied any connection, and instead claimed that the police began investigating him out of dislike. He said, "I don't think they have a really good suspect, and I'm somebody they don't like, so I think that's it." His home in Twin Falls was searched under a warrant on behalf of Greeley PD's assumption that he was directly responsible for the abduction and murder of Janelle Matthews. At the time of Janelle's initial kidnapping, Steve Pankey and his now ex-wife had lived just
Somebody's shooting off fireworks right now, man.
about 2 miles away from the Matthews home. After the police search of his house, Pankey said, 31 days ago they searched my house, took a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm still at home, so obviously in all my stuff they found nothing connecting me to it. It being Janelle's murder. Pankey even voluntarily agreed to give a DNA sample to the police, a choice that may prove critical later. At the time of Janelle's disappearance, Pankey had served as a youth pastor at the very same church that the Matthews family attended weekly. Upon further investigation, Steve Pankey claimed to have never even known the Matthews family. Rather, he asserted that he had only ever heard of them as a result of Janelle's case.
Number one, it wasn't until my wife and I and our 5-year-old returned from Colorado.
He's a super capper. We got 10 people in the live stream, man. Hit that like button as you come in. Appreciate it, Mr. 79, man. She couldn't have been the only one. Yeah, it's typically not the only one.
Or from California to Colorado on December 26th. That was my first night, on that night, and the car radio was the first time I heard that Janelle Matthews existed or disappeared. That was my first knowledge of that.
You a lie.
Yet, in an interview with the Colorado Sun, Pankey contradicts his story by acknowledging that he had, in fact, been a youth pastor at the church. Shockingly, he also includes the information that he had been accused of assault by the piano player at the church. Not only did he know Janelle and her family personally, but he had also made efforts to speak with detectives following her initial disappearance. According to the police, Steve Pankey initially inserted himself in the investigation many times.
That's always a red flag, man. I know from watching all these, like, criminology shows and theorology, you know, association. Whenever you associate or whenever you insert yourself into the investigation, that is a red flag. Because obviously when you do that, to the feds, it comes across as you're trying to see where they're at within the case. Oh, he's trying to get his, he's trying to get his information type stuff. Why would you do that? Like, it's funny how they have specific characteristics and actions that, like, killers and unsubs basically have. Like, they'll do certain things and it's well documented. I don't know why they do these things, like revisiting the crime scene. Like, You would think that that's an easy way to get caught because cops they pay attention to that kind of stuff, bro. Like
over the years, and even claimed to have potential knowledge of the crime that could help officers. However, he refused to give investigators any information unless they granted him immunity beforehand. Back when the case first began, Steve Pankey had discussed some details with the police, accidentally mentioning that the footprints that remained in the snow outside of the Matthews home had been covered up using a rake.
What had happened, y'all? What had happened? What's y'all's theory? If you're joining the live stream, hit the like button. Let's get to 30 likes.
I died.
Let's get to 50 likes, man. We got 12 people in the live stream.
That small piece of information had never actually been released to the public, causing the police to have their initial suspicions regarding Pankey's potential role in Janelle's disappearance. Yet beyond that, they had no probable cause to investigate him at the time. According to the police, Pankey claimed to have watched the students walk home from Franklin Middle School almost every day.
Now he's stalking
the
them.
Same school that Janelle and her sister attended around the time of her disappearance. Yet Pankey declared that he and his wife had been at home on the night of Janelle's disappearance, as they had been planning on heading out of town the next day for a trip to Big Bear Lake in California. However, upon receiving false statements and superfluous details regarding the trip itself, the police decided to interview Pankey's now ex-wife, Angela Hicks. Angela told the police that she and Steve had actually started their trip on December 22nd, 1984, not on the 21st. More so than that, Angela said that the trip was not planned. It was entirely unexpected.
Ooh.
When the couple returned to Greeley on the day after Christmas, Angela said her then-husband had taken an unusual interest in Janelle's case, and even forced her to read the newspaper articles concerning the case. And then, Steve even started digging in the yard of their shared home for a reason he never revealed to Angela. Later that same week, a vehicle stored on their property mysteriously caught fire and burned to a crisp. In 2008, Steve Pankey's own son was murdered unexpectedly.
What?
Angela recalled that at their son's funeral, Steve stated, "I hope God didn't allow this to happen because of Janelle Matthews." At the time, she'd not thought much of it, as she had assumed that Steve was grieving and at a loss for comprehensive words. Pankey later addresses this accusation in a statement.
Now, another interesting layer to this whole case, Gretchen, is that when police searched his home, Pankey told me that they took a DVD from him, and on that DVD was actually his son's funeral from 2008. Now, I asked him why detectives would want to take this, and Pankey said that he heard the detectives think that on that DVD is a recording of him saying that he hopes this didn't happen to his son because of what happened to Janelle Matthews. Now, Pankey said that that thought has never crossed his mind and that he's never said those words ever.
Despite being ultimately unhelpful,
This guy's a weirdo, bro.
with the police search when Janelle first went missing, after his name was again associated with the disappearance, Pankey was not afraid to speak liberally with journalists or news outlets. In fact, he had many inflammatory interviews with reporters as the investigation turned to see him as a primary suspect. Pankey eventually gave a 51-minute incendiary interview to KTVB. He speaks casually and with flat effect through the entire interview, and his manner, one arm cast leisurely over the back of a bench, appears far too unfeeling for a man suspected of the horrific murder of a child. When speaking of the night that Janelle went missing, he reveals he has, as he puts it, a gay background.
Have a gay background. It's all over the internet. It's well known. And I had multiple problems with local law enforcement. And so I was thinking, oh no, here's coming another arbitrary charge. So they flashed their lights towards my house and towards the house next to me. And then they just turned around and left. So I thought nothing more about it. We went to bed.
As pointed out by keen observers in the video comments, Pankey seems to mention his homosexual background frequently in the interview, as a way to dismiss any belief that he would have an interest in young girls like Janelle.
I got a copy of the newspaper, and the Janelle Matthews thing was all over it. It was the only murder in the area that was at the time, or disappearance at the time, that was talked about. So,
Panky appears to stumble over his words here, catching himself referring to the case as a murder, when at the time, and for 35 years, no one had known she was murdered. Some viewers have seen this slip up as an admission of guilt, and perhaps it is, as only the murderer would have known Janelle was not simply missing. However, it could be explained that Panky was filling in information retroactively.
Hey everyone, this idiot.
He slipped up.
To explain his involvement in the case, Panky explains that his father-in-law told him that when he worked as a groundskeeper at the local cemetery, he had a cop tell him that he had a body that needed to be buried in a casket, and that it would look bad for Steve.
what I did is the very next week when my attorney got back, I called him and I said, I don't know if this has anything to do with the Janelle Matthews case or not, but I may have some information and I don't know what to do.
This guy.
And he said that he would be concerned about obstruction of justice, and he didn't go into any detail after that. And I owed him a lot of money, and his voice was like not real friendly about this. So I thanked him. I got off the phone. I then called the Fort Collins, because I had a bad relationship with the Greeley Police Department. I called the Fort Collins FBI. The FBI I talked to an agent named Lyons, a special agent Lyons, and he said he'd call me back the next day and tell me where we'd meet. Well, what I told Lyons on the phone is I wanted to avoid an obstruction of justice charge. I just don't want to have a problem. So the next day he called me back and he wanted me to meet him at the Greeley Police Department. So I met him there. What I told him was somebody had talked, I said I had talked to my attorney, and if you get rough with me, I'm going to lawyer up, and that'll be the end of it. But I said, I talked to my attorney. Somebody had talked to me about a body. They never mentioned the name Janelle Matthews. They never mentioned any name. But I thought the conversation was weird, and I don't totally trust the person that said it.
Throughout the interview, Panky had suspiciously long pauses, where he seems to forget the next piece of his story.
Mm-hmm.
He claims that a cop is involved with Janelle's disappearance, and frequently references this theory. Panky claims that this story with his father-in-law is the total of his knowledge about Janelle's disappearance.
So I was thinking, this is the end of it. There'll be no more.
Panky has even taken to social media to air his grievances with the Greeley Police Department, and has claimed that the police have tried to frame him for the young girl's murder. When asked why he wants Janelle's case to be resolved, Panky's answer appears to have a distinctly frustrated tone.
And then can you tell me why you want it to be resolved?
So it's resolved. So it's over with.
When in doubt, Thousand said, call the FBI. Bad move, but yeah, you don't call the feds, bro.
So that family has the same closure.
Yeah, your
that
ass
I
now,
have.
boy.
Okay, that's.
And also, I mean, talk about wouldn't you like it resolved to maybe have your name cleared, or?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, without a doubt.
Following his rather chaotic interview with KTVB, Pankey sent a statement to KTVB in order to clear some of the allegations that had risen from his initial interview, and to, quote, make a more concise overview of the entire case as I saw it from my perspective. In the statement, he went on to actually name people whom he believed could be persons of interest for the police.
This guy.
He includes Russ Ross, the father of Janelle's friend who had driven her home the night she vanished.
This dude
Greeley Mayor John Gates, GPD Chief Mark Jones, and he even names himself as a suspect.
Chloe and her therapist.
This guy about to be the, if he ain't the dumbest, he said he named himself as a suspect.
And in his new statement on Saturday, he said he believes police are manipulating evidence to make him look guilty. One example he lists is that the probable cause affidavit for police to search his Twin Falls home.
It states that I am associated with that property that she was found on where they're doing the gas drilling. I mean, that's a blatant lie.
Pankey appears to refer to himself as a victim in the investigation, and many people in the comments have pointed out how consistently insincere he sounds when referring to Janelle.
Probably most people don't realize in the 300,000 or how many missing exploited children there are across the United States, there are a lot of people that are victims in it. It goes, the rock in the pond has many rings, it just keeps going out. There's a lot here. I am not against them solving it. Oh.
Guilty.
Okay. I'm for solving it.
On October 13th, 2020, Steve Pankey was indicted on charges of first-degree murder and kidnapping in Janelle's disappearance and subsequent death.
What?
As of November 2020, 69-year-old Steve Pankey is being held without bail in the Ada County Jail in Idaho, awaiting his eventual extradition to Colorado for trial.
No way.
Upon Pankey's potential association with the case becoming public knowledge, a variety of true crime podcasts have realized that Steve is a Patreon patron of theirs. Chillingly, Pankey was even discovered to have been a Patreon of the popular podcast The Trail Went Cold, one of the first and only podcasts to cover the Janelle Matthews case.
Bruh.
Perhaps Steve Pankey's eerie obsession with Janelle's case is an indication of something far darker than his claimed status as an average true crime lover. It will be interesting to see what happens through the course of Steve Pankey's trial, as he is the first proper person of interest in the Janelle Matthews case in the last 36 years. We don't yet know what happened that cold winter night, but soon we may finally find out.
Soon?
Perhaps the most positive thing to take away from Janelle's story is this. She and her family may finally receive closure to know what happened to the unsuspecting 12-year-old girl who was brutally murdered all those years before.
They're just remaining optimistic. That's what that sounds like. We may find out soon enough. That's a sad story though, bruh. Cold cases, man. Damn these cold cases. Let's solve these crimes. Let's figure them out. Explore with us got some long stories, man. See how long we've been live. Been live for 33 minutes. What time is it where everybody's at, man? Let me know what time it is where you are at. If you haven't hit the like button and you're in the live stream, hit the like button. Missing teen's car found deep in the woods. Huh? Oh, man. Say why you should never travel alone. 5 true horror stories. Wow. These stories is wild. I'm going to do probably one more, y'all. I'll do one more story. I'm going to keep it short, though. Yeah, Ted Bundy. Ah. Oh no, that one looked creepy. I'm doing this one. Why you should never travel alone, man. Be safe this summer, y'all. Take care of yourself. You know what I'm saying? Big Bear Lake disappearances. What you talking about with him?
What is up, Ewu crew? Today we will be covering our top 5 most sinister examples of why you should never travel alone. The following tourist horror stories will make you rethink your upcoming solo adventures. Starting at the bottom of our list is a story that begins in Costa Rica in November of 2018 with Venezuelan-American Instagram model and social media influencer Carla Stefaniak. In celebration of her 36th birthday, Carla and her sister April Burton planned the perfect Costa Rican vacation. The two scheduled sightseeing expeditions, made reservations for delicious dinners, planned to enjoy cocktails by the beach, and were raring to go and have a fun time. In general, their vacation went well. However, a day before their trip was over, April needed to head back to Miami, where the two sisters lived. Carla's flight was not departing until the following afternoon, so she opted to stay the night in Costa Rica by herself. This seemingly minute decision would change the course of her life forever. After April left for Florida, Carla decided that there were still a few things left for her to see in Costa Rica. Being an Instagram model and social media influencer, a lot of her career focused on getting the best photos out of a vacation. With her sister's help throughout their trip, Carla had been able to get some great pictures that ended up on her Instagram page. After an unforgettable day of solo exploration, Carla returned to the Airbnb that she had been staying in with her sister. However, when she arrived at the rental home, she realized that none of the light switches in the hallway were working. After trying everything to turn the lights on, she concluded that the power must have gone out. With the little battery she had remaining on her cell phone, Carla managed to send a text to her sister, letting her know that the power was out on the property and that she felt a little uneasy about it. Throughout their stay, Carla and April had often remarked that the area around their Airbnb did not seem the safest, but that it was good enough for the price. Little did either of the sisters know that that would be the last text message Carla would ever send. November 28, 2018 was the last time anyone ever heard from Carla Stefaniak. Well, except for one person, that is. On December 3rd, 2018, just days after her family had lost contact with her and she missed her flight back to Miami, Carla's remains were found. Tracker dogs had discovered her remains, wrapped in plastic and half hidden on a sloping path near the Airbnb property. It did not take long for local law enforcement to find the monster behind Carla's demise. After all, her remains had been dumped just 200 feet from the rental property. Investigators quickly learned of a man who had direct access to the Airbnb unit that Carla was renting. Bismarck Espinoza Martinez, a local security guard, became the first and only suspect in Carla Stefaniak's murder. It is assumed that Martinez attempted to assault Carla in a certain way we cannot say on YouTube.
Hold on. Bro, I forgot I had some extra coffee, dude.
During the struggle, Carla tried to fight back, leaving scratch marks and bruises on Martinez's arms. It is believed that during this altercation, Martinez fatally wounded Carla for not doing exactly what he wanted. Martinez then disposed of Carla's remains on a remote part of the grounds where she was later discovered. After committing such a heinous crime, it is rumored that Martinez called his wife and told her what he had done. Not long after hearing his confession, his wife called the police. Martinez's DNA was found at the scene of the crime, and he was arrested for the murder of Carla Stefaniak shortly after.
This guy.
Bismarck Espinosa Martinez was later charged with the Costa Rican equivalent of second-degree murder because there was not enough substantial evidence to prove that the murder was premeditated. He was sentenced to only 16 years in prison. The next story we
I don't get these like cases where people be getting like 10, 15 years for killing people. Like, make it make sense for me.
have for you today, coming in at number 4 on our list, is that of Catherine Kate Chappell. If that name sounds familiar to you, it might be because she was a senior visual effects editor who worked on various popular films and television shows, most notably HBO's Game of Thrones. As evidenced by her work, Kate loved film and had a variety of other passions and interests. One of these passions was wildlife conservation. In June of 2015, Kate went on a trip to Johannesburg in South Africa to advocate for wildlife conservation and raise funds for the Wildlife Act. The Wildlife Act is a conservation charity and one of the many endeavors that Kate was devoted to in her spare time. While in Johannesburg, Kate decided to visit Johannesburg's Lion Park to get up close and personal with the animals she so desperately wanted to protect and save. While at the park on the afternoon of June 1st, Kate was given the opportunity to ride through the reserve in an SUV. This was a common practice for the Lion Park, in which a driver who worked on the premises operated a vehicle containing tourists. The Lion Park had only one firm rule: the car windows had to remain up for the duration of the drive. When the SUV containing an excited and eager Kate Chappell began driving park, everything was normal. After driving for a while, Kate's SUV briefly stopped to better look at a pride of lions. A tourist in the car, just behind Kate's, watched in awe as a pair of lions approached Kate's vehicle. The male lion brushed up against
Hit the like button if you're just joining the live stream. Hit the like button. Let's get to 20 likes.
the side of the SUV like a house cat between its owner's legs. For a moment, the lioness by his side propped herself up against the vehicle, curious to get a better look inside. Usually, the saying goes that curiosity killed the cat. Unfortunately for Kate, the opposite was true in this case. The driver of the SUV failed to realize that at some point during the drive, Kate had rolled down her window to snap the best pictures possible. Instead of rolling the window back up, she continued to reach her arms and cell phone out of the vehicle to take more photos.
Come on, man.
In one swift movement, the ever-curious lioness lunged through the open window of the SUV.
Oh, man.
Kate had no time to react, as the lioness bit into her shoulder and then her neck, severely wounding her. The driver of the vehicle quickly began trying to fend off the lioness in an attempt to save Kate.
Chill off.
When the lioness finally retreated from the vehicle, the driver tried to apply pressure to Kate's wounds to keep her alive. By the time more park employees and paramedics arrived on the scene, it was already too late for Kate. Kate Chappelle lost her life in the passenger seat of the SUV before help could get to her. The lioness sauntered off. The third story that we have for you.
That's a crazy story, man. That's a wild story. Be safe on these safaris and stuff like that, man. I don't know, man. Seen a lot of stories like that.
For you guys begins in Isla Colon, off the coast of Panama. In 2017, 23-year-old Catherine Johannet was just a young adult exploring the world. She had previously graduated from Columbia University with honors and worked her first teaching job abroad in Vietnam. Catherine loved learning, which is why, when she found herself with some free time over a winter holiday, she jumped at the opportunity to travel around Central America for the first time. Panama was somewhere Catherine had always wanted to visit, so she decided to plan a vacation there, chock full of educational experiences. She intended to explore Panama's various archipelagos and provinces, and learn as much as possible about the country's culture. Towards the end of her trip, Catherine decided to venture away from her hostel on Isla Colon, the main island in the Bocas del Toro archipelago, and head over to the popular Bastimentos Island. She decided to make her visit to Bastimentos a simple day trip, and informed the hostel staff on Isla Colon that she would be back by evening. She did this to ensure that her belongings would remain untouched, and that the space she'd been sleeping in would stay reserved for her. She packed up a few of her things and stuffed them into her trusty travel backpack. And then she was off on her latest adventure. Little did Catherine know it would turn out to be her last. Late in the evening on February 2nd, the same day Catherine set out, employees at the Isla Colon hostel realized that she had yet to return. By then, it was already getting darker and darker as the night rolled in. The staff knew immediately that something was seriously wrong. Catherine was a tourist who did not speak much Spanish, and it was her first time visiting Panama, let alone venturing out to Bastimentos. Right away, local law enforcement was informed of the tourist who had abruptly gone missing. Not even 3 days after Catherine had disappeared, a woman's remains were discovered along one of the beaches in Bastimentos.
Dang.
The woman had been suffocated, it seemed, with the very same pink bathing suit that she had been wearing. Local officials suspected right away that there had to be a connection to the female tourist reported missing just days before. When investigators arrived on the scene, they were shocked at the state of the remains. It was evident the woman had been brutally attacked by an assailant while walking along an isolated, wooded trail. She had probably been alone and did not even know she was being followed until it was too late. It was later discovered that the killer of Catherine Johannet was a 17-year-old boy native to the Panamanian island. The boy, whose name had remained anonymous on account of his status as a minor at the time of the crime, was quickly located and arrested shortly after the incident. At his trial, the boy was convicted of charges that include robbery and murder. Since he was not yet an adult, he was tried as a minor and sentenced to only 12 years in prison.
That's crazy, bruh. Some little kid, man. These kids, man.
Continuing with our countdown, number 2 on our list of eerie stories today is the mysterious case of Elise Dallamagna. The odd chain of events leading up to Elise's demise and the discovery of her remains is what makes this case so chilling. Elise Dallamagna was a Belgian woman who had been traveling around Asia for a little over 2 years. During this time, she had been staying on and off at a yoga and tantra retreat on the full moon party island of Koh Phangan in Thailand. Feeling as though her life had come to a standstill, Elise decided to mix things up and return to her native Belgium. On April 17, 2017, Elise talked to her mother on the phone and relayed her feelings, letting her know that she would soon be returning to her hometown. On April 19th, just days after speaking to her mother, Elise left the island of Koh Phangan for the island of Koh Tao. Those following her case are unsure as to why she decided to detour to Koh Tao instead of taking a ferry directly to the mainland. But this is precisely what she did. Once she arrived, Elise checked in to the Triple B Hotel at Mayhat Bay and asked for the cheapest room. She only planned to stay at the hotel for a night or two before heading to the mainland to catch a flight home. However, when checking into the hotel, Elise exhibited some very odd behavior. She filled in her full name on the hotel paperwork, and then, without reason, crossed out her last name and replaced it with a fake one. When asked for identification by hotel management, Elise refused to provide her passport details. She told them that she would get the information to them later. Not long after checking into her hut, Elise booked a ferry ticket to Chumphon province on the mainland.
They were after. The boys were after.
Scheduled to leave the following morning. But as she settled into her room at the Triple B Hotel, something peculiar happened. A fire broke out among several hotel rooms, including Elise's. In fact, officials were suspicious that Elise had started the fire herself, or that it had originated in her room.
I don't know about all that. If you're in the live stream, man, and you haven't hit the like button, do me that favor, hit the thumbs up. Let's get to 20 likes, man.
Regardless, she was forced to flee from the hotel as 3 different huts began to burn down. After the fire, Elise continued 2.5 kilometers through the jungle to Tanote Bay and checked into a room at the Poseidon Resort. There, she booked another ticket to Bangkok that was scheduled to leave on April 24th. Looking back at her journey, it is clear to see that she was anxious to leave. The following morning, when the ferry from Mayhat Bay arrived in Chumphon, Elise was nowhere to be found. All that was discovered on the ferry was her unattended luggage. No one had any idea what had happened to Elise for days, nor did they know where she had ended up. Her unattended suitcases were enough cause for alarm, though, that search parties had been sent out to look for her, but they consistently returned with no valuable information. And then, there was a strange discovery made in the jungle of Koh Tao. The locals living near Tanote Bay, where Elise had been staying, began to see a monitor lizard acting strangely. The lizard repeatedly wandered back and forth from a remote part of the jungle over the course of the day. This was odd because it meant that the lizard was feeding on something, but that something was too large for him to finish in one sitting. Curious as to what the lizard had preyed on that would last him so long, the locals decided to head into the jungle. When they came to a clearing, they were shocked to find the remains of Elise Dallamagne hanging from a tree.
Bruh.
When the discovery was reported to the police, local law enforcement immediately ruled that Elise had taken her own life, with hardly any questions asked. Though that is what appears to have happened, the ruling was deemed suspicious because Elise was the 7th foreigner to meet their end under mysterious circumstances on Koh Tao in the past 3 years.
Oh, I mean, it's a trend, man. There ain't no coincidence. Come on, bro.
Koh Tao holds the nickname Death Island because of the various tourists who have lost their lives throughout the jungle. According to local law enforcement, the victims were ruled to have taken their own lives or simply been unlucky in almost every case. In some cases, the victims appeared to have attempted to end their lives under similar circumstances, but they suspiciously had their hands tied behind their backs. These incidents, including the mysterious demise of Elise Dallamagne, were never fully investigated and have never been considered anything more sinister by the local police. Finally, number 1 on our list is the case of Azusa Shita Ino in Kalalau Valley, Hawaii.
Wow.
Shita, a 31-year-old woman visiting Kauai from her hometown of Fukuoka Prefecture, Japan, was enjoying her vacation when things took a turn for the worse. Kauai is a notoriously beautiful place to visit, and a frequent tourist destination for those hoping to get away on a tropical vacation. That was exactly what Shita had in mind when she arrived on the island. Immediately, she began taking in the sights and adventuring on the local trails. After exploring for a while, Shita began frequenting one trail in particular, the Kalalau Trail. While on this solo vacation, Shita met a man named Justin Wynn Klein. Justin had just moved to Hawaii from Oregon for reasons he would not disclose to Shita, but she did not seem to mind. Justin was handsome and charming, so a few missing details here and there did not bother Shita. She let her attraction to him get the best of her. After all, she was on vacation in a beautiful place with a good-looking man who wanted to sweep her off her feet. And sweep her off her feet he did. On the afternoon of December 16th, 2012, Shita and Justin went for a hike along the Kalalau Trail, as it was Shita's favorite. The scenery was perfect for a vacation that had turned into something straight out of a romantic film. Or so Shita thought. When the two hikers reached one of the peaks along the trail, they stopped to look out at the beautiful horizon. Suddenly, Justin seized Shita by the arms. At first, Shita thought he was being playful and trying to fake scare her. And then, she was properly scared. Justin inched her closer and closer to the cliff's edge, holding her out away from him so that she could not fight back. It would not have mattered much anyway if she had. Justin was far larger and stronger than she was. In a split second, Justin suddenly let Shita go. She fell 15 feet down into the valley below, a fall that Justin had anticipated would end her life.
For what? Bruh, I don't be getting it. What was his whole reasoning? That's crazy, bro.
But that was not the case. Miraculously, Shita managed to survive. She was rescued in critical condition and spent time in the hospital before recovering and returning home to Japan.
Dang.
Local police began a manhunt that lasted 4 months, until Justin turned himself in as a fugitive. Once the police arrested him, they investigated his background and discovered that he had already been on probation for various crimes in Oregon before he came to Hawaii. Shita, as it turned out, had narrowly avoided becoming Justin's first murder victim. In March of the following year, Justin pleaded guilty to a lesser charge than attempted murder to avoid trial. As a result, he only had to serve 5 years in prison before walking free. We urge you to use these cases as examples of times when it would have made all the difference to these victims if they had had someone accompanying them on their adventures. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like.
Bro only served 5 years. That's crazy. He only had to serve 5 years, man. So those were Explore With Us reactions, man. I've been live for like 2 hours in between just the live stream I did before this and the one now, man. I appreciate everybody that's joined. I'm going to end the live stream. Be sure to hit the like button if you haven't hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, man. Appreciate everybody rocking with the channel. Peace, love, prosperity. Till next time.